You may have heard of the term cycle breaker, or for others, the generational curse breaker. But what does that really mean? I'm your host, Jasmine Grullon, and today's episode, I wanted to go ahead and to go in more in depth about what exactly is a cycle breaker. You see, a cycle breaker is someone who comes into a lineage not to fit in, but to disrupt it, to question it, to transmute it. It's the woman or man or child who couldn't keep quiet at dinner tables full of dysfunction or abuse. It's the person who felt like an outsider in their own home. The one who couldn't pretend that pain or abuse was normal, or that silence was even safe. You see, for the cycle breaker, there's a different perspective on life. There's things that they just feel and see and just can't dismiss and just can't let it go, because deep within them they feel this pull, this purpose of having to stand up for something greater than themselves, having to speak their voice and not fall into the trap of any form of oppression or control or silencing of the expression that comes natural to them. You see, when you are a cycle breaker, there is this intense willpower that is given to you so that you can indeed go through the path of your purpose being such with great courage and bravery, which will indeed be necessary. Because if you ever find yourself in a position of being a cycle breaker, you've always felt different, like you didn't belong in your family, or when you had friends, you understood everyone, but not always everyone understood you, right? They would only be limited to a certain level of a perspective of the why behind your behavior. Meanwhile, on your opposite side of your observation of them, you have much of a wider spectrum of their behavior, because the way you perceive the world and the way that your intention is always to understand, so that in your understanding you have a form of empathy and compassion towards what you are observing within those around you. You look to understand and they look to fit you in a box. So right then and there's always that, whether conscious or unconscious, internal or even external conflict within the groups that you may experience, whether it's family, friends, or just society as a collective. And also, being a cycle breaker, you seem to be more sensitive, more intuitive, emotionally aware, maybe even called too much in your intensity of being sensitive. If when you were a child, you felt very empathetic towards the energies around you, let's tend to question tradition or beliefs that people accept without blinking, without questioning, without contemplating, is this truth or is just this something that is being conditioned onto me as a form of programming for control, which to some degree, to keep a society in order, it is necessary. But when you bring it into the dynamic of a home and you see that there's certain elements in the household of your upbringing that were completely dysfunctional, were lacking certain moralities, and they had abuse or they had neglect or they had lies and so on, and you witness the dynamic of all of these things, and instead of participating in it as it being something normalized, you feel it that is not always right. And the fact that you feel it that is not always right, the reason why to you as a cycle breaker it being considered not right is because of the way it makes you feel. You see, when you are coming into this world with such purpose, you're not only experiencing the world through your lens, per se, through your experience. Not only are you processing what's happening within you and your own experience, but you are now able to see everybody's point of view. You see why one person feels this way, and you see why the other person feels this way, and you're basically the bridge between the miscommunication, between the abuse, because you have a deeper understanding already of these, let's say, individuals in your family. Let's say it's people that you grew up with, that you've been around most of your life. So therefore, the behavior patterns that each and every individual carries, you kind of know who's a little more sensitive, who's a little more aggressive, who's easily too tempered, who's more submissive, who's the people pleaser, who's the manipulator. All of these traits you already know in these individuals. It's not something that you like or dislike. It is just in your knowing of these characters in your life, in which, on a grand picture of things, when you come into this world with such purpose, you're not really looking to point the fingers at this person did that and that person did this when you wake up to the reality. You might have done it when you were younger. You might have felt certain ways and taken things more personally because you still had to experience the full embodiment of what it feels like within these dynamics, so that you can truly assist by the resonance of the knowing of it, right? Because how can you assist or understand or help anyone understand themselves if you yourself haven't had an element of these very same energies in your personal experience, so that you yourself know how to endure it, process it, observe it from multiple perspectives, so that in knowing and understanding it, you can heal it, process it, and let it go. And here you find yourself transcending over those limiting beliefs or those fears or those behavior patterns that are not functional anymore for the dynamic of the family, per se. So here you have to go through life in the not knowing of why you're here, in the not remembering of your purpose, in the not having the ability to fully be in the embodiment of who you truly are, which is a very masterful, balanced individual or spirit that is able to withstand intensity while remaining balanced within themselves. But remember, in order for you to know what is it that you need to process and heal and break, what cycles is it that you need to break, you need to go in it in the not knowing of nothing. Because to know it, you won't allow yourself to be in it, right? Because as we grow and we learn, the more we know, the better we do. And the better sometimes is completely avoiding what is dysfunctional, completely avoiding what is toxic, completely avoiding what we know is not good for us. And therefore, how can we truly assist and do what we came to do if we know better, so we do better, and do better means completely avoiding it? You see, this is why there is a time, and for most a long time, before we wake up and remember, all right, that's what I came to do. Because I had to first experience the dynamics, the lessons, and the energetic embodiment of those very cycles that I came to break. And how do you experience these things? Well, I'm going to go more in depth with that. But just know that because you are a cycle breaker, if you are, you will be drawn to healing. You will be drawn to inner work, shadow work, generational patterns. You're looking at patterns like it's a game. Like every person you meet, you're looking for patterns, consistent patterns. You know somebody not by what they say, sometimes not even by what they do consciously. You're really trying to see what they're doing unconsciously. And what does that look like? Well, I would go more in depth, but I want to create another episode for just certain dynamics of that nature, because that in itself takes a while to really accumulate the knowledge and the complexity of how you can actually see people's unconscious that they don't know themselves that they're dealing with. But that's how you really get to understand and know someone. To remove all judgment, because like I said, no one is right or wrong. Everybody is just functioning based on their level of consciousness, based on their perception of life, based on the history of their own experiences, of their own conditioning, and so on. So what you're not trying to do as a cycle breaker is see who was right and who was wrong. You see, by doing that, you waste time and energy on the unnecessary. The task is not to point the fingers. The task is not to see who did it right, who did it wrong, because it takes two to tango in the energetic world. And when you look at it from a bigger picture, there was some form of participation on both sides of the spectrum. And we all have to take accountability. And the sooner we learn to take responsibility and accountability for the experiences that we are experiencing in our life, the sooner we go into the process of healing those aspects of us that even align us to resonate with such energies or such experiences. You see, so what I teach is never to point the finger. If you're still in the energy or the impulsivity to point the finger and everybody's fault and it's never yours, then you're truly still not ready to heal. You still have to go through a few more trials and errors and realize that you continue to be the common denominator in the same story, just with different characters. And once you realize that, then you start to wake up and you say, hold on, let me reflect back on myself and realize that there's something I'm doing that I'm resonating with the same storyline and the same concept and the same way I choose to perceive my experience, because it is in my making, because it is in my alignment. And if it wasn't in my alignment, I wouldn't experience it. So that's when you find yourself doing that, then teachings that I teach are going to be more receptive for someone to actually really do the work when they're going through this journey. Now, because you are the cycle breaker, like I said, this would be something that will eventually, with time, hopefully sooner than later, will be an innate impulse. You're going to find yourself living your life, the best life. You think, oh yeah, life is great. I'm partying, I'm going out, I'm living the life. I have this, I have that. I do this, I do whatever I want. And then boom, something happens where it's like an internal alarm clicks. And all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, what am I doing here? What's going on here? Who are you? Why am I here with you? This makes no sense. Why would I put myself here? Or why am I here? Why am I working here? Or why am I living here? Or what's the why behind this? Why am I choosing this for myself? And that could be a good thing or a bad thing for you. That's all subjective, as there is no right or wrong. Everyone has their own opinion based on what they observe in that moment when that alarm rings internally and you just stop to question. I remember the first time, this has happened to me since I was 11 years old. The first time it happened, I might have shared this previously, but the first time it happened, I was 11 years old. I had gone through something emotional a few years prior, and I had, as a coping mechanism, I started to hoard sentimental things, random things, like what hoarders do. But I was so organized that I only had this one drawer that I would put these sentimental things. And the sentimental things had to be really small because I didn't want to mess up my room or make it messy. See, there was a very contradicting thing. Like I still had the sentimental attachment to these sentimental items that I myself would give meaning to so that I can remember the memory, because I didn't want to forget the moment, right? And this all came as a coping mechanism to something that I had experienced when I was younger, where I felt like, oh my God, I don't remember what my mom looks like, because it had been so long. And I remember I was mad that I didn't have a picture of her. I couldn't see her or remember her or hear her voice. And all I could say to myself was, if only I had a picture where I can see her and remember what she looks like, because I'm starting to forget. And I was very distressed and upset. So after that, I started saving things. Like if my friend gave me gum, I would save the gum wrapper and I would write the date. So gave me the gum on this day. And I tried to make it into this collage thing eventually, but I didn't. I was just hoarding these things. And this is all done unconsciously. This, like I said, this is a natural coping mechanism that me as a child learned to do because of something that I had went through previously, that I had not processed, that I had not been able to reframe and perceive from a higher point of view. Therefore, the only way I can process or deal with such a traumatic event was that. And I remember one day I'm cleaning up my room and I'm organizing my closet, and I was like looking at my closet, seeing how organized it was, and I'm like, oh, I should do color coordination on the clothes. And then I remember I didn't have enough of a certain color. I go to my drawer and I open to see what shirts can I hang. And I remember opening the drawer that I had all the stuff ordering, and I'm like, what is going on in here? It was like a moment of an epiphany that came into the awareness that I was doing something that was not so functional, that was not in the alignment of the energy I wanted to be in, which was having my room clean and organized. There was something in this drawer that made me feel messy, because it was messy in there. And I remember that internal contradiction happening, where I felt like I wanted to do this because it meant something, and I wanted to hold on to dear life to it, because I thought that if I threw it away, I would throw away the memories, I would throw away the moments, right? Remember, this came from a younger consciousness, a very innocent consciousness. And I guess me, obviously, being always more mature than my age, I was 11, and I said, okay, I don't want to do this anymore because I don't want to have a messy drawer, and this is disgusting. And I had like even gum inside this plastic container, and it was leaking, and that was it for me. Say no more. I took that whole drawer and I just tossed it out, and I never looked back. I remember grabbing a garbage bag. I put it in a garbage bag and I threw it out. And I never looked back. And that was the first time that I was able to wake up from a unconscious behavior that I was doing due to a traumatic event that took place years prior. And I was able to see that even though my entire room was clean, this one drawer was so messy, and it threw off the energy of what I wanted to maintain. And even though it was a physical expression or aspect that I became aware of, this is exactly what happens to us spiritually, mentally, even physically. We hold on to these emotions, these beliefs that are not so functional, that are not in alignment with the things we want for ourselves, with how we want to be and how we want to act and the person we want to become. But we're holding it because we gave it this subjective meaning that really doesn't mean nothing. But to us at that moment of grief, or that moment of sadness, or that moment of desperately wanting to hold on to the things that we think we might lose, we do things impulsively or even unconsciously for most of us. So when that alarm kicks in and you are on this path, what happens is you start to wake up. Not all right away, because if you do all right away, it'll be a very traumatic transformation that would be too intense for anyone to deal with. But it's a very subtle waking up each and every time you graduate from a level of yourself, from a moment of learning that lesson. So as soon as I was able to let go of that, I stopped doing that, right? I reframed the meaning behind it. At this time, I already had, a relationship with my mom. I would talk to her. We got back in touch. Like, all of these things happened. So I no longer had to attach myself to wanting to keep memories. So what I started doing is I reframed it to keeping the memories in the pictures. And I would have tons and tons of pictures of my friends, of going out, of my family, of everything, because I wanted to save the moment. So instead of hoarding items and garbage, basically, pictures was the upgrade for me. And with pictures, I would buy albums and I would put them in there, and that was it for me, and that I can organize. So I went to reframe the meaning I was giving those things, and I realigned myself to something that resonated with what I wanted to keep. So if I wanted to keep organization, I had to reframe the way I kept memories. And instead of holding items in garbage, I got a camera and I started taking tons of pictures, and I started developing all the time, and I made albums. And I have tons of albums of all the memories of me growing up after the age of like 12 and up, of course. So this is basically what cycle breakers do. Throughout the generations, basically, this is what the generations before us did. Something happens, then all of a sudden there's this belief that this gender is not safe, that this genders are liars and cheaters, and all of a sudden they're passing this storyline, this narrative, this fear, this insecurity down through the generations, because everyone keeps repeating the same cycle, and you only keep repeating that which you don't become consciously aware of until you do, which is why when you are a cycle breaker, you carry deep desires to understand, so that in the understanding of the why behind that story, you could break free from the story and reinvent it, because you learn how to reframe it. You learn how to transcend it by healing from it. And that is what you call alchemy on a spiritual, mental, and physical and generational level. Because in order for us to heal what is unconscious within us, we need to become conscious of it. And in order for us to become conscious of it, we need to experience the experience that allows us to embody these emotional charges, these emotional states, these impulsive reactions, these storylines that came out of our mouth, even though we don't know where they came from, because I've never experienced this, but yet here I voice this very same story I've been hearing for most of my life, that came from my mom, or came from my grandmother, or came from my grandma's grandma. And here I am repeating something that I'm saying as if I myself have also gone through the same storyline, which indeed I have not, but because I am now affirming this very same thing, I am aligning through the resonance of my energy, through the intentions of what I am saying, with the same storyline. Whether I've experienced it or not, it is a belief that I believe to be true, because of something that my great grandmother had experienced, and we continue to experience the same thing. So when you become aware of such patterns in your lineage, for example, you start to feel overwhelmed when you start to realize the internal contradiction in yourself, because within you have the ability to see within the experience and relate with the experience and resonate with the experience, because that is all you know, right? You grew up in that environment. You saw what you saw in that environment. You learned what you learned in that environment. So there is an aspect of you that defines yourself to be a part of that environment, because that's all you know. You still have yet to discover who you truly are, and your purpose, and your definition of what the essence within you is. So that contradiction starts when you start to step back and realize, okay, I've been hearing this, my whole life, and I get it. I get where it's coming from, and I can resonate to some degree. But as I move back and remove myself, I can see how it's not so true, or I can see how It's not the best belief to have. Or I see how limiting it can actually make us as humans, as a collective, or as a family. I see how it can be very manipulative or abusive or lacks integrity or has an inability to move forward because of the fear that it's creating, right? So now I am in the resonance stepping back, and in the stepping back and reflecting on not only what's happening, but on my internal conflict that's saying, this is what you grew up in. This is the molding you came into, but you're not here to repeat it. You're here to rewrite it, which is why you find that a lot of cycle breakers often carry a mix of guilt and grief and greatness because they see what others can't see. They're trying to heal the wounds that didn't even start with them, but they know it must end with them, right? Because there's something in them that says, okay, I have to do it because they're not seeing what I'm seeing here. They're blindly following and not questioning. They're blindly repeating without asking. And sometimes you find yourself asking why? Because in order for you to get to the root of all of this, you need to have a better understanding of why it's even there. Because once you get the root and you get a better understanding of why that root cause is there, now you understand the cause to the effect. And when you get the cause to the effect, now you are within the effect, transcending, transmuting, and alchemizing all of this within yourself. Because within yourself, once you heal, once you become aware, once you expand, once you let go, once you reframe and expand into a different perspective of life, you allow everything and everyone around you in your proximity, but as well as in your genetic imprint, collectively, to now transcend too. It just takes one to break the barrier of the limitations, one to break the fears, and one to heal what hasn't been healed before. Because once the barrier is broken and they see that it can be broken and they see how it has been broken, now there's hope. Now there's belief, not only in themselves, but as a whole. Because what happens? You have to come from the environment, from the family, from the culture that is limited, that is in fear, that does not believe in that potential. So that when they see that you came from that very same thing and they see you doing differently, you're leading that example. And now everyone wins. That is how it works on a physical level. Now, when you think about it in the terms of epigenetics and ancestral wounds, for example, what you're feeling and what you're experiencing isn't all in your head. Like science breaks it down. What many of us feel spiritually, for example, it's sometimes trauma that can be passed down through our genetics. And when our DNA is holding the imprint of trauma, from oppression, from speaking what we felt, from the oppression of slavery, from the oppression of being a woman in a patriarchy society, or all of these elements that limit our full potential. Not only do we restrict the wounded and the victim, but society as a collective can't evolve and can't grow and can't upgrade because we're still holding back what's supposed to be in unity working together. Because if you have two wheels on a bike, but you're holding one back because you don't want that wheel to go where the other wheel is going, because then they might pass you, you fear. But guess what? That one wheel being held doesn't let the bike go neither. Nothing goes anywhere. You're only living in the illusion that you're moving, maybe, but you're not. You're stagnant and you're stuck in a loop that makes you believe that you're going somewhere when you're not going anywhere. But when you allow everything that works together to work together, so everything can actually truly grow and evolve and expand, then there we are going to see the evolution of society, the expansion of consciousness. Most of us think, oh, what's the big deal if, not everyone heals and stuff. And you're right. It's not meant for everyone to heal, because if everyone heals, we won't have the current contrast so that we can see what it looks like when you don't heal, right? But for those of you who are receiving my message, who are in the resonance of such wisdom, and if you want to heal, if you want to evolve, and you want better for yourself and your lineage and your legacy and your family and your community, just know that it doesn't take a whole system to change and heal. You doing it for yourself, within yourself, creates a ripple effect that impacts everything. This is why I always say, we don't need to heal thousands of people. We just need the right people that really feel, that really know who they are, and can transcend that to create those ripple effects. I don't do this to reach masses. I do this when I feel called to. I do this when it is within me to share. Because when I speak, I hope to reach the person it's supposed to be meant for. So I don't want to, step away from the topic here. So I digress back into the topic of, currently we were speaking of the epigenetics, how there's so much trauma that is being passed through our genetics, and we don't even know where it came from. There's certain fears that we may have, and we don't even know where they came from, and because we never experienced such a thing. So how would we be fearful of something we don't even know to exist? All of these things are passed down through epigenetics. So whether that's emotional, behavior, even unspoken pain, they echo through generations. And the cycle breakers are the first one to hear that echo clearly enough to interrupt it. So when you're interrupting it through the epigenetics, it's basically you becoming fully conscious and aware of what is that pattern that is being passed down. So for those of you that don't quite know what epigenetics is, I'll go ahead and clarify that for you. So epigenetics is the science of how your environment, experiences, emotions can change the way your genes are expressed without changing your genetic imprint itself. So think of your DNA like a sheet of music, and the epigenetics as the conductor, deciding which part gets played louder or softer or at all. So if you're thinking about how certain epigenetics activate, think about it like this. If you are coming from a lineage that was prone to certain crimes or certain activities or certain behaviors, most of these behaviors and activities and crimes were activated through their environment. So if you're in an environment where you want to be a sweet talker, the gift of gab, right? Because you are living in survival. You are living in the environment that allows you to succeed if you know how to speak to people or gain people or even manipulate people. This could be something that you had never been prone to, for example, but once you are in the same situation, in the same environment, with the same energies, for example, there's this innate knowing within you that just knows how to do it. You don't know how, and you have no idea where that came from, but you just know that it came natural. The same thing for a healer. Some healers are just naturally able to just come up with certain remedies or certain elements that they've never learned, they never even thought of. but for whatever reason, a situation or a sickness or something happened and they knew exactly what remedies to put with what and what to do. And the next day it was like 1, 2, 3, they were brand new. But they don't know where they knew how to do that. Where did that information come from at all? It was just an innate knowing of everything that needs to be known when you are in the circumstance or in the environment or in the situation that certain things activate within themselves. So like I said, in those two examples, something can be perceived as positive and something can be perceived as negative, but it is aspects within you that are completely unconscious in most cases until you are in the environment that allows you to practice or activate these elements of these epigenetic imprints within yourself. So when we think about epigenetics and how that functions, you have to start to realize when you are a cycle breaker, are these behavior patterns, are these beliefs, are these insecurities and fears activated by the environment? Are they activated by your nervous system that holds certain impulsive reactions when something comes about? They have been studies made with rats that once they smelled, they were put in a cage and they were being shocked. But when they were being shocked, there was an essence of cherry or something like that. Cherry being sprayed before the shock happened. Now this kept occurring throughout the cycles of the mice that were being tested, and eventually the shock stopped occurring. But once the rat smelt the cherry, and this is a brand new baby mouse or a rat that had never went through the shock, but once they smelled the scent of the cherry, they went into anxiety. They went into this internal fear, which, you look at that and you realize epigenetics is a lot deeper than what we assume, because for a mouse or a rat that was being tested on to experience the same level of fear that the parent or the grandparent felt when they were being shocked without being shocked. Now that is an nervous system imprint that is activated in your genetic imprint, that once that smell of cherry is experienced through the senses, your nervous system now picks up the alarm that there's something wrong here. So when you think about the elements of our history, whether it's through slavery, whether it's through history upon history of children that were abused, molested, through the pedophiles that at one point in history was normalized. The same way with slavery, where it was normalized, even legal. There's so many of these aspects that still live on within us that makes us react in ways that we can't always necessarily explain. And this is why you can't judge people for their reactions and their actions, because in reality, we don't know their story. Most times, they don't even know their story. Most times, they don't even know the why behind their reaction and impulse, because there's internal genetic history that is being expressed through them, through the reaction of experiencing the trigger that has now activated, right? So here, this is when we have to have a better level of understanding and compassion for our fellow humans. Why? Because there's so much underlying things that are actually occurring within all of us. And especially if you came with the purpose of breaking these cycles within yourself, so that in doing it and solidifying the healing within yourself, that impact, that effect impacts everyone in your lineage throughout time and space. Because when we start to think about it on a quantum level, there is no such thing as time and space, right? This is all something that we use, man-made laws that allow us to measure the time between our spaces. But in reality, there are so many complexities to our nature, and I don't want to go in depth with that. But when we start to realize that what I do in this now moment is not only influencing this now moment, but it is also impacting the infinite parallel versions of myself, where once I become fully sovereign, not only can I experience, but I can tap into and see where we all stand, and collectively in the infinite fractalization of that self-consciousness, I can maneuver the generations through the gathering and the tuning in, tapping in, and turning on within the individuals of the generation. So I don't want to, that's way too deep for this episode, but basically we are still limited in our experience of the complexity of what reality can potentially be for us. Of course, in theory, I'll say. But based on my own gnosis, based on my own experiences and what I've learned and what I've witnessed and what I've explored and experienced, there is a vastness of wisdom that is yet to be explored. So to keep myself on topic, I'll go ahead and continue with the epigenetics. So how does that play out in our family? So when you have traumas, emotional suppression, abuse, poverty, war, racism, shame, all that can create emotional imprints that can change how the genes function. So these imprints can be passed down through sperm, through egg cells, meaning children inherit more than biology. They inherit responses to pain through trauma that they didn't even experience, fears that they don't even know of. But yet, if something resembles something similar to the fear that a great ancestor experienced, then all of a sudden they have this impulse to be fearful of something they don't even know what it is. So this is why someone might have, let's say, anxiety or people pleasing or emotional shutdown or self-worth issues without even knowing where it started. But the curse breaker or the cycle breaker often carries emotions that didn't even originate with them. But all they know is that even though I'm experiencing this thing, I have been reflecting and I have been observing long enough of myself and those around me to know, okay, this is a pattern. This is a pattern that might have came from previous generations before me. And here's another interesting topic. So when you come with such purpose, you are definitely going to be an observer of people from all walks of life. You are interested in watching people all day long. You can literally just ask the why behind people's behavior because you're curious to know, especially those who are generationally attached to you or connected to you, because to some degree they are a reflection of another aspect of your making, right? There might be different configurations here and there, but if you were in their making, that's who you would be. Therefore, they are reflecting an aspect of yourself. So to judge would be silly because to you and your higher mind and your higher self and your observation of the bigger picture, you know that they are just a reflection of another version of you. So the way you see it is no longer, oh, they're doing this and they're like, no, you're saying, if I was them, this is who I would be. Why would I be this way? What made me this way? What did they grow up watching? What did they grow up listening to? Who raised them? How did they get raised as opposed to how I got raised? How much love did they receive as opposed to how much love I received? How much of a difference was my life compared to them? There are negatives and there are positives. There's our pros and there's our cons. But in this configuration, they came out differently than I did. Sometimes it could be the same exact upbringing, the same exact story, the same exact trauma, but yet one chose one way and the other chose another way. There is no right or wrong. All is subjective. But here what we do is we pay attention to the patterns and what is the common denominator in all of these different patterns. And that's how you discover the cycle, the pattern that you need to break. Because there'll be this one thing or 2 or 3 or even 4 or God knows how many. That doesn't matter how different our choices were in life. Doesn't matter how different our personalities were. Doesn't matter how different our careers, our childhood was. There's going to be these designated common denominator of patterns that we will all have. And you will be the one to see, okay, this is a normalized, dysfunctional pattern that we all as a collective are holding or are acting on or are behaving on or are believing to be. And in my awareness of self within the belief that resonates with, I understand why we agree on that. But you step back and you realize, okay, but I also realize that this is not functional. It's not functional. Why? Because it's keeping us trapped in fear. Because it's keeping us trapped in limitations. Because it's keeping us trapped in negative, low vibrational energies that don't allow us to collectively evolve. That if we have new generations being born, they will only be repeating the same cycle and the same story with the same tragedy and the same suffering and the same fears and enabling and people pleasing and anxiety and health concerns and health issues and mental disorders and all of these things that obviously have proven generation after generation not to be so functional. And that is the unconscious aspect that we need to learn to make conscious, not only for ourselves, but also for our families. So what are the traits, basically, that you would know in terms of a personality cycle breaker? Because right now you probably heard, if you heard this whole episode, I appreciate you, because I don't know, I'm trying to make it shorter, but it's pretty hard because there's so much elements to this. But some can relate to being a cycle breaker and some cannot. So how would you know in terms of personality traits, right? Most cycle breakers don't even realize they've been initiated by life. They just know they're different, right? And they have certain common personality traits that kind of gives it away. So I'll go ahead and break that down. So if you find yourself being hyper aware of everything, where you notice what others overlook, the tension in a room, the contradictions in family beliefs, the unspoken pain or abuse that everyone throws under the rug and thinks is normal because they've been doing it for so long. Why startle that? Why interrupt that? No, you as the hyper aware individual would look at these things and immediately know it's not right. When you see someone getting taken advantage of, you know it's not right. When you see someone's getting abused and used, you know it's not right. When you see someone's getting lied to and cheated on and all these things and it's normalized because that's just what's normal, considered normal, you know deep within you that is not normal. That is a dysfunction that has been continuing on generation after generation, and no one's willing to do the work to break that cycle so that we can break out of the frequency that even aligns us with such characters, with such experiences, and with such wounds that make us less of ourselves, right? So that's one way you will know. Another way you will know is you have deep empathy and emotional sensitivity, as I spoke before. You often find yourself feeling emotions more intensely. You both have, it's like a wounding, but also a gift, because you love that you can feel the emotions of others and yourself deeply. But it's also overwhelming at times. Sometimes you need to isolate and recharge. Sometimes you just need to get away because sometimes the sensitivity is so intense that you don't even want to deal with it on certain days. So this is when you need to learn how to shield yourself and protect your energy so that you can preserve yourself and not absorb the emotions and the states and what's going on around you. But this will take some time because this is a learning practice that needs to be practiced in order to get to the strengthening of it. But in the beginning, it's going to be very intense and overwhelming. When you express yourself from your heart. You feel this great passion. When you do it with great passion, intensity in everything, right? And like I said, it's a gift, but also a curse at times. Another way you would know is you're a truth teller. You're the truth teller energy, and you come in and you ask the hard questions. You speak up when others stay quiet, and they might label you difficult or rebellious. Why? Because you're not willing to stay silent. You're not willing to back down. You're not willing to just allow people to get bullied. You're just not willing to not do what's right, because you quickly know, and because you empathize, you quickly realize that if that was me in that position, what would I want for me in that situation? So you turn into the person that you need in that situation as a truth teller. Whether you're going to stand up to a bully that's bullying somebody that's completely not even on the same height or mass of bravery or even embody, right? Whether they are or not, it's not right. If you know that someone is doing something that's wrong to someone else and they're doing it behind their back, are you going to just let it and enable such behavior? Or are you going to start setting the tone around those around you so that they know not to feel comfortable with such behaviors around you? Because you're not going to continue enabling that behavior that has been enabled throughout the generations, which is the only reason why it continues. Because what you allow will continue. And if everyone continues to enable something that's not right, then guess what? Why would it change? Why would it not happen? Right? So as a truth teller, you will stand up for things. You would speak your mind. You would ask the hard questions. You would tell people to open their eyes to the reality of what is really happening so that they can wake up from the slumber, basically. Another characteristic trait would be you are the outsider, the black sheep identity, right? You often feel like you don't belong in that family, in that culture. You're either, when you're in one place, you're like, they tell you act like the other place. And when you're in another group, they tell you act more like that group. And when you have for example, a very cultured person that has a very vast ability to kind of resonate with most people, whether it's through culture or music or environments, professionalism, slang, all of that, people could see the vastness of how different you are, and they want to put you in a box, but they know you don't quite fit in their box because you have a more expanded nature to you, because you see a vastness of perceptions of reality, right? And that energy is always felt. So there's something sometimes completely unconscious to them that it's not that they intentionally want to reject you per se, but it's this like, you are here, you're supposed to fit in, but you don't quite fit in because you kind of think different, you kind of do things differently, and we kind of like it, but sometimes you're challenging our beliefs, so we don't kind of like that because we don't like to shake things up, and we don't really got the time or the energy to do the healing and to do the introspection, and we're comfortable, and when we're comfortable, we don't feel like there's a need to change anything. So sometimes, because of their perspective on life, you may feel like the outsider or the black sheep, and you may carry shame or just isolate because of it. And sometimes you just like to be, as an outsider, you actually like to be the outsider. You like to be isolated in your own energy because there you preserve yourself more, and you only go where you want to go when you feel like going, not out of the necessity or the obligation, right? So it's a pro and a con depending on who you ask. So another aspect of a personality trait will be an impulsive inner growth, right? You're drawn to healing, shadow work, therapy, spirituality. You're doing research on breaking generational patterns, even when it's painful, even though you know how much it's going to take, even though you know nothing about this topic, you have this inner knowing and desire and pull and attraction towards the work. Even if you know you have to leave certain things behind, certain people, certain places, that you love and you cherish and you've been used to and you've been comfortable in it, you know that internally that inner conflict is not going to stop if you stay stagnant, if you don't keep going and moving forward and evolving and healing and processing and reflecting and doing that internal work that keeps you vibrant and alive because you're doing what you came here to do. It's only when you're not doing it that you're going to start feeling all kind of depressions and whatever else people deal with, because inside within them they know there's something more they're supposed to be doing, but they don't know what, or if they do know what, they don't feel like doing it because they honestly don't want to do all of that. So here's when you're in the fence. Normally this only happens in the beginning when you avoid it like a plague because you're like, no, I'm living my best life, I'm having fun, I don't got time for that. And then life is like, okay, we're gonna have to do the forceful for her because she's taking her time, she's not trying to start, and the time is ticking. And at this period of your time, you've already learned the molding, you've already seen the patterns, you've already been in the embodiment of those emotional charges so that you can better understand the behaviors and the patterns and the dysfunction and the addictions and all of that that came with your lineage generations ago. You already know that, so now is the time for the work. So if you don't choose it by choice, the universe, the God, will push you towards it, because if that is your purpose, best believe you will be forced into it. But once you are in it, it's going to be natural for you to just move with the cycle. It's going to be like once you break the barrier of, oh, okay, I got it now, I'm going to do it, got it. You're going to naturally just fall into the pattern of like releasing everything that no longer serves you, letting go of all toxic relationships, friendships, locations, habits, everything. It's almost going to be like God will give you that inner willpower that you will need to do this work. You just have to trust and have faith that you have what it takes to do this, because if you didn't, you would not be chosen for it. You understand? If you were not chosen for it, you would have not been doing it. But if you do it, all you have to do is start to do the work. And I promise you, the willpower, the determination, and the fortitude that is necessary, with the courage and the bravery that's needed, will be there. And there is no stopping you, because you will not be alone. This is something that you need to understand, how crucial this work is, right? And when you're doing it, you may feel alone. It may look like you are alone, but I promise you, you are not alone in this process, because this is not only a you thing, this is a generational thing. This is the backing of your own ancestors praying that you get it because somebody has to. This is the backing of your guides, of your protection, right? Of your army, because this is bigger than you. This is not just a you thing. Don't let the ego get the best of you. This is not just a you thing. You're just one of the very much many throughout infinity doing the work through the upgrade of the entirety of the system. So understand that when you dedicate yourself to just doing the work and starting, you will have everything you need. You will have the mindset, the energy, everything I'm talking about. You will not be alone. Even though you may look and feel alone, you will not be alone. So just be in the trusting of that. Okay, moving forward. And another one would be basically, you have to break before you build. That's the journey. Unfortunately, it comes with the territory, where you often have to go through early life hardship, through emotional breakdowns, or initiations that force deep transformation, right? There's going to be so much blessings and rewards, but also so much intense hardships and ups and downs, because all of this is breaking the barriers of the seal that had sealed the imprint in the past. You are basically, through yourself, through your own experiences, are breaking yourself so that in the breaking you rebuild yourself simultaneously, by the way. So as you break, you're building. You're breaking, you're building. But it is all orchestrated in such a way that the breaking never feels like you're breaking. It just feels like an intensity, because then you start to transmute this energy, and then you start to rebuild on that very residue, right? You're going to take the broken pieces and you're going to rebuild it for the new, because energy never dies, right? It cannot be created nor destroyed, but it can be transformed and transmuted into something else. So this is exactly why when you are a cycle breaker, you're technically an alchemist coming in to the embodiment of these elements, of these emotional states, of these experiences, so that you can experience the very same thing that trapped or bound your lineage in the past, so that in the embodiment and the feeling and the sensations and the full sensory of such experiences, you find yourself in the moment of, I got the energy, I feel it, I know it, I am it, and now I am going to become inside of it something else. So cycle breakers don't heal in a straight line. They pretty much rise from the ashes again and again and again until the cycle ends with them. So if you find yourself resonating with this episode, realizing that, oh, that makes sense, the whole time I've been a cycle breaker, the whole time I've been a generational curse breaker, and this is why my life has been what it's been. This is why when I'm done with a lesson, I have no attraction to it, I have no pull to it, I just release it with grace and love, with gratitude, and I move on to the next, because God needs you to keep moving forward. Comfort is not going to be a thing until you're done with every single lesson you came here to transcend, transmute, and transform into the next new thing for you and your generation. So, with that being said, I appreciate your presence and hearing this episode. I hope that if it did resonate with you, you understand and know that you are not alone. Not only do you have, God, the universe, your ancestors, your guides with you at all times, but also you have the community of, I'm sure, so many individuals that are destined with such purpose, that can be intense, that can be quite, a lot for a lot of us. But guess what? If you weren't built for it, you wouldn't be doing it. If you weren't born for it, you would not be doing it. So it is not until you start to do it and you start to realize, oh shit, I am made of this. I am literally built for this. This is when you start to realize. But if you don't start it, if you don't allow yourself to just flow with the energy of the divine plan for you, so that you can reach each and every element of these lessons, of these generational blockages, of fears, and also all of that, then you will be stuck in the loop, because you will be in it. But if you don't do the work to exit from it by going through it, then you're going to be trapping yourself as well in a loop, and that's what we don't want. So if this is something that you are currently dealing with and something that you want assistance with, I am going to start to publish more information about this and how we go about it, and content. I might share my other socials so you guys can find me there. So that we can build more of a community on the topic, because I feel like this is a very important topic at this time, as I have been compelled to share this information with you guys for some time in the recent months now, because I think that the time has come for me to share this with you guys, as I've had done quite an amount of work, and I feel very, great and alleviated and accomplished, and as my completions have reached certain levels where I can feel comfortable to share it with you guys now, and I can go in more in depth about what this actually looks like as you're in it, right? Because this is where a lot of people get stuck in. They don't know what's really going on. They don't know what's happening. They think it's all these attacks and all of this, and technically it is, but not in the way that you think it is. I'll just say that. So if you are interested in that, just leave comments, your feedback below, and I'll try my best to answer your questions. And tell me what's something else that you would want me to